In reality, only a select few individuals hold the power of influence. Not a pout over a luxury item never to be owned, but real influence over police, governments, and even clandestine fraternities. My true story is so controversial that I invite you to comment and even question my integrity. Episode 8. The Devil's Advocate. Maria, long, straight brown hair, fitted dress, tanned, looking 10 out of 10. If it were not enough, she was cute, respectful banter, manners, and the whole foyer froze, eyes planted firmly on her as we entered the lift and onto the Horizon Bar on the 36th floor of the Shangri-La. We had cocktails and a night of pure indulgence. So much so that once we were back in my room, a knock at the door with the bill as I was handed what I had left over of the $3,000. An evening of nearly $2,000, but it was worth it as the sun rose the following morning. Light in the room just as Maria had done the previous evening. The morning of the Rugby World Cup Final 2003 had begun. Maria left around 8 o'clock and I went to enjoy the atmosphere as she got ready for the match. I thought to take the final look at the pre-match antics of the Fortune of War and just about found a way to the bar after 30 or more minutes. I had a drink and I couldn't see Alan anywhere, and it was when looking at a backpacker leaving the bar that I noticed it was Alan. "Al," I shouted, "where are you off to?" He looked back, seemingly saddened, and I made a point of understanding if he was okay. He went on to tell me that he was leaving as he didn't want to get to the stadium in Australia only to find his ticket was useless and potentially be arrested. I reminded him that only one of his tickets was deemed a dud. He dug a little deeper, telling me of the things he'd forsaken just to follow English rugby. Lost jobs, opportunities, the cost, and even lost time with his family, which whilst he deeply regretted, such was his passion for the game and his love of England, he kept on doing it. I'd been lucky in love already, with an unsteady stream of women and to enjoy a life with, and wondered if it was time to put myself last in favour of a passionate England rugby fan. It was England after all. Look, I told Alan that we would sell his B tickets and spend all the money on beer. His eyes went up. I added that I would take him to the Rugby World Cup Final as my guest, with my Category A ticket, and we could sing Waltzing Matilda on the terraces and encourage England to win. He seemed shocked and amazed in one single emotion as we went round the pub, asking if anyone would like to buy what must have been the only ticket left for the match. I found an interested punter, and after an hour, 5 of his rugby friends closing out the light on the midday sun with their physique came in. He bought the ticket for face value, $280 Australian dollars. And then we got onto the train instead of the Mercedes, along with all the other England fans, singing away as we entered the arena. There was an almost equal number of opposition fans, the home fans, Australia, and the atmosphere was electric. Our viewing point for the match was unreal, and on the centre line middle tier, and we could see everything as if we were playing alongside them. With the match on equal terms at half-time and something of solace, and only 2 Irishmen were calling banter to the English, which soon fell away once the beer was flowing again and the interval and back to the action. The minutes were closing, and we needed an act of inspired genius. As we all know now, our hearts skipped a beat as we watched Jonny Wilkinson drop-kick the winning points. I saw it like I was standing next to him as the stadium erupted. Alan and I were hugging and jumping at the same time, trying to stop crying, and such was the emotion of that final. Everyone was ecstatic and cheering at the top of their voices. With the lift of the trophy and a few more beers, we left, and Alan couldn't have been more grateful. He had finally seen his dreams come true, as we all had, as far as the rugby was concerned anyway. And with a final sleep and check of the hotel phone voicemail, I heard, "I'm here, where are you?" It was Maria, and I was prepared for the long journey back to reality and home, England, and the next chapter of my life. I visited all of Custer's clients, caught up, brought in some cash, and generally got back to work. I went to see the avid rugby fan based in Earlsfield, and as I entered, he was so excited to see me, as if he hadn't seen me for years. "Sit down, Darren, do come in, how was it? I've been telling them all at the rugby club that you went. I bet it was unbelievable. I can't believe it." "If you only knew," I said. "Go on then, tell us all about it. Cup of tea?" I declined the tea, and his Swedish wife was also an equally keen rugby fan. She stayed for the story, and it hasn't changed. As I got to the point in the story where Jonny kicked the winning points, he was already welling up and once with Alan and myself hugging and jumping around the terraces, then he needed a tissue or a box, as he was clearly very emotional. His wife, on the other hand, was showing a smorgasbord of emotions, arms folded, tightened behind her back, smiling and leaning towards me, wondering whether she wanted to kick me or punch me. Then came the resting face. You know the one. Once hearing of Maria's voicemail, as a girl's girl, she stormed out of the room. He looked round as she left, watching the door close behind her. Fucking proper, mate. God, I can't wait to tell the chaps down the rugby club. Fucking can't wait. With that, the BMW arrived. I collected it and everyone was on it. It was one of the first in London. And with the roof down or up, it was so cool. Such a cool car. My credit rating was intact and I was a homeowner, which I had remortgaged with Michelle's assistance for nearly £250,000 after investing about 20 in it. I drew down there some of the equity and bought the car, paid some bills and invested 20 grand into a business. As I moved into the business, as I moved out of the basement and took the offices and shop front at 507 Old York Road, London. The car was welcomed. Bert said it was a boost of morale. We hadn't really done much other than engage with a lawyer in Bedford Row, Chambers, and asked them to look at various things, and they were supposedly doing it. One particular thing they were doing was to look into finding the helicopter video. We all saw a helicopter. There were statements that there was a helicopter, 8 of them, and quite naturally there's a helicopter video. But no one seemed to know if there was one. There's nothing in the evidence, the unused evidence, nothing else other than these statements that there was one. No mention of video. As we were waiting for the correspondence to go backwards and forwards, Bert would tell me of how the screws, or some of them, been in the special forces, and would try and challenge him in fitness tests. He'd beat them all, and then for fun decided to create one of his own by completing 100 deadlifts of 100 key in under 4.5 minutes. No one could compete with him, as he retained the strongest man at HMP Swellside every year. Don't worry if these lifts or achievements were completed correctly, as the scale rule come out by the screws, along with the excuse after excuse to defunct Bert's achievements. What they were trying to do is say that he didn't do them correctly and all that, but he knew that. So he did them absolutely perfect, which only helped his training and lifting abilities. Bert was around 125 key at that time. He'd completed all the baller and certificates right through every single one. He was the strongest man in the jail for up to then 4 years, undisputed. He'd won every fitness test, created his own, won all them. He was eating tins of tuna, chicken, coffee. Paul had somehow gone through the daily trauma of the mental hospital with every word he said. Dr. Lawson, his psychiatrist, would stick it into him, and it didn't matter whether Paul was right or wrong, having a good day or a bad day, and let's be fair, sentenced to murder he didn't commit, only to serve time in a mental hospital, drugged against your will and stopped any outside recreation. Might give you a bad day, no? It was at this time that we started noting significant changes, even though there were many changes, many issues going on at that time. The Trisha show really did stick it into the old bill, and they were worried that we could get into the media. As soon as the programme was aired, Paul lost all parole, not because of any other reason other than the Trisha show. They said, "We don't want you in the media. We don't want you promoting your case." Bert had all of his privileges taken away because Essex Police and the government want to bury this case so they can protect all of the people who are now judges, politicians, percent gangsters. That's what they want to do. That's what they've been doing for a long time. But let's get into that. The main thing with all this is finance. And we'd woken the establishment up to the fact that we were getting through everything and funding everything. So the way that they act in any war zone situation is to kill off communication and finance. Communication being to get into our family, and finance other areas to stop work and earning potential. It wasn't too long before Tara's extension was booked in to start. I arranged a visit, collected 10% deposit, check, and as I arrived, I was led into the kitchen where she was preparing something in the oven. She held out an introduction. "Darren, meet Robert, my friend. Robert owns an estate agency in Bellevue Road." And the look on Robert's face, as if he'd been somehow demoted to friend, as it appeared obvious that he was either chasing her or had given up the chase to enjoy the meal. We discussed the project. Robert showed interest, whilst Tara explained that she worked for another estate agent in Northcote Road, Clapham. Tara signed and I left for home and to the Elmer pub, and after meeting with Jennifer at Realm Estates a few doors away, I signed contracts for her to manage 109 Ericsson Close and rent the Masonette at 81 Putney Bridge Road. I was handed the keys and went straight round there. With entry to the ground floor was a wet room. and a four-wet room, shower, everything. Right-hand side was the stairs, and up the stairs, wound round to the left. On the right was a bedroom, and then a huge living room, the whole width of the house. As you look up, there's no ceiling. It goes right up to the Velux windows in the roof slope. There's a mezzanine floor with another staircase going up to a huge kitchen, a 10-seater dining table. Back on the level with the living room, you go through bathroom, another bedroom. It was a proper pad. We had a pair of French doors leading out onto overlooking Putney Bridge Road, and then just across the road into Wandsworth Park and onto the River Thames. It was lovely. Needed a clean, so much like the Cali, painted the whole place up, cleaned out the open fireplace, brought in my leather sofas, which were much better fitting in that place, big place, than my little flat round the corner. It all worked. I put out usual single man speakers, 20, 30 speakers around the place, and I was pretty much set in. I'd walk over the road along Wandsworth Park and into Riverside Quarter, which is where I was planning to live with Michelle and the benefactor of the rugby trip. Spring was in the air, and I noticed a single tennis court, which I loved to play, but hadn't played for so long, nor had time to. I looked down Putney Bridge Road, saw my cars lined up, Jag, Saab convertible, E46 M3 convertible, 2 vans, a Ranger truck, brand new off the rack. The pad was amazing, it was fresh, family were well. I was out in the K bar most nights, and just as things again were going well, just as things were going to plan, I received a call from Bert. Dal, I've met a bloke in here from Basildon. He's doing life for murder with a 16 rec, and he says he's got the best solicitor in the world. He will fight anyone. He'll fight the establishment, and you want to see him and his clients. They call him the Devil's Advocate, because his clients are Saddam Hussein, Slobodan Milosevic. He's also the business associate of a Serbian parliamentary leader and war criminal. You know something, Al, it's going to take a lawyer like this to get our case done, and I wonder if you'll go and see him for me. Here's his number. I took the number and called Giovanni Di Stefano. I made an appointment to meet him at his home at 4 to 5 King's Wardrobe, London, EC4, and a stone's throw from the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey. As I entered, I was greeted by a vicar, introduced to me as the Reverend Payne, and later explained as Giovanni's bodyguard. It's now believed that this same character married a lady in the US and took her business off her estate agency business, or travel agency business, along with Giovanni, but apologies for the hindsight on that. That's the guy that I met. We sat at a small table just inside the entrance door and discussed the rounds of the case, the sampling errors, who's involved. I love it, Giovanni replied, or plain G, as he was preferred to be known to those who knew him. Have you heard about my new documentary, The Devil's Advocate, Darren? I don't believe everything you hear. I'm not worth 400 million. I'm worth double that. You may also have heard about my clients, and I appreciate that I'm charge a premium for my legal work. I am a trained lawyer, you know. I have the best barristers in England working for me, and I have one in mind for your brother's case. Did you bring your checkbook? I did, I replied. Well, look, let's cut to the chase, shall we, he said. It's going to cost you $10,000 for initial advice, which is cheap as a barrister I refer to, as he usually charges double that if you're lucky to have him. Yada, yada, yada. And the sales pitch and the self-indulgences continued, and I was sucked into this new solicitor. Not so much sucked in, really. I heard of him. He was supposedly notorious, supposedly this and supposedly that. Supposedly up for a fight. It was a fight that he would have to face questions or pose questions to Paul Harris, George Carter Stevenson, and many others. I took out my personal checkbook and wrote his company, Studio Legale International, check for £10,000. I thanked him and left. Bert phoned the same afternoon. The phone transferred to my mobile from the landline. Did you meet him? How did it go? Is he on board? I could hear the anxiety from Bert, and I hadn't heard this from him before, as he took his sentence on the chin. I was then overjoyed to give him the good news of instructing the solicitor, Giovanni Di Stefano, the Devil's Advocate. I'll add another 4 plates next time I'm in the gym, Bert said, meaning he'd add another 20k each side to the bar. He was excited, and with the added interest of his car, the conversation concluded positively and we all moved in the right direction. Summer was on its way. Wandsworth Park lit up in the mornings, colour and sunshine filling the flat. And even though I was in a great place, I couldn't help feeling an uneasy presence. Call it intuition again, paranoia, anxiety, these feelings commonplace at these times. I wanted another tattoo for some time, and I thought long and hard as to what I would have. I purchased a book on General George Armstrong Custer and visited Angelic Held Tattooist at 181 Wandsworth High Street, where I had the Great Seal of the United States tattooed on, covering the top of my right arm, exactly as it was shown in the book. 13 stars, each star representing the original colonies of the first 13 states: Connecticut, Delaware, Georgia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, and Virginia. I called Giovanni. "Hello, G. It's Darren, Bert's brother."
"Hello, Darren,"
Giovanni began,
I haven't forgotten about you.
nervously beginning the conversation.
"I've instructed counsel, David Martin Sperry, to review your brother's case and form grounds of appeal. David is a real heavyweight and regarded as the best criminal defence barrister in the country. And I agree. Bert has instructed my firm, Studio Legale International, and paid for a barrister to carry out this work."
"Oh, mate, thank you, and well done. That's great news, and Bert will be over the moon. You couldn't have given me better news. And as I'm interested in helping you and your client's case, and as you've been so helpful, I wonder if you might accept me acting as surety and guarantee for your client, Darren Cullen, for his bail application." Giovanni was spluttering.
"I hope I heard you correctly. Are you saying that you'll go as surety for Cullen on his proposed bail hearing? Is that right?"
"It is," I replied, not really knowing the full extent, but I had to agree.
"Well, look," he said, "the first thing I must tell you is that Cullen has only just started his sentence and has about 13 years left to serve. Cullen's appeal is based upon the incompetence of a pathologist. And in addition, anything we can achieve regarding Cullen's appeal also affects another of my clients, Kenneth Noy, as he also had the same pathologist in his case. Look, it's a real long shot, but if you're up for it, then salute."
The preparations were made. I was suited and booted, Armani suit, shirt, tie, Prada belt, shoes. On the 20th of February 2004, caught at Lavender Hill in Clapham, and was approached by a definite copper. "David gives his regards, Darren. Says his book is doing really well and he's off to enjoy another promotional tour on a cruise ship. He's asked me to tell you to say hello to your brothers for him." How do you control your anger in that moment? I have no idea how I did it, other than to know that having a third brother on a violence charge would have condemned us all. And without the financial support, who knows what would have happened to us, as the visits would have become less, the cars gone, the canteen funds diminished to little or nothing. As I tried to calm myself with the realities of lashing out against this cunt, I knew that the consequences would far outweigh any relief I gained in the moment. I went on to the court. "What book?" was my only reply. The judge in this bail hearing was the Old Bailey judge, Sir Neil Dennison QC, a respectfully profiled and relatively small man of elder years and in a position of great power. As he began to set out the proceedings, there was a distinct reverberation of laughing out loud from the prosecution team and Essex police. The judge looked through his eyebrows, hoping that he would stop the disturbances before his gavel was required. Defence counsel for Cullen appeared in shock to have found himself at the juncture for bail after what must have been quite a battle to even get Cullen into the bail application into court. I was called into the witness box, and the laughter increased in volume from the prosecution and police as the judge interaction of "come on now, keep the noise down please." The judge asked me about myself, good character, businessman, no previous convictions, my understanding of the liabilities in support of Cullen. "Yes, Your Honour," I replied. "If Cullen breaks his bail conditions, I'll be put in prison." The judge looked round the room and the laughter remained, albeit lowering in volume. No, you will be not sent to prison. Instead, you'll lose your funds, and in which you give surety, and Cullen will return into custody. Is that clearer, and are you still prepared to proceed on that basis?" "I am," I replied, as the laughter was also at an end when the prosecution stood and asked what was left of their sneers. Darren, you are indeed a man of good character, a businessman with a successful loft conversion company locally in Wandsworth. You have given surety of thousands of pounds offered to allow Mr. Cullen to live with you in your luxury flat in Putney, and even stated that your company Custer will employ Mr. Cullen, pay him a weekly wage, and you will personally deliver him to the local police station every evening in Wandsworth at 7:15. You will no doubt have a social life, clients to meet in the evenings, things to do, and if nothing else other than to relax. The court was in absolute silence. Why then would you do all of this? when you've never even met him? The judge looked at me. The whole court did, as I replied, You're right, yeah. I've never met Mr. Cullen. But I do trust my brother. And my brother told me that Mr. Cullen is a good man, who finds himself in an unfortunate position, and he requires help. I trust my brother, as he has met with Mr. Cullen, and trust him. It is for this reason I have done what I have done. Now, look, I don't know, neither will I ever know, whether the judge is a Freemason nor if brother can be assumed as brethren, and whether this is any reason to accept my explanation. But he did, and Cullen got bail. The court and Cullen's family erupted as the prosecution shuffled out of the courtroom. The family all gave me a hug and thanks. For me, I needed to drive to HMP Chelmsford and pick up Cullen. On the way out of the court building, I made a point of walking by the cop who had originally approached me. Do let David know the good news today, won't you, mate? I went home and decided to collect him in the M3, and as the Jag may have been a little too G even for Cullen. I changed and drove to Chelmsford Prison and waited at the gate for Cullen to appear. As he walked out, all I could hear from him is, "What a fucking motor." Hugged me, shook my hand, cuddling me, thanking me, before jumping in the car and looking at every gadget. His eyes popped as he clung to the seat as I took the traction control off and hit the sport mode for the trip back home. Remember, he's only been walking to get into that thing and do what we were doing, frightened out of his life. We arrived back and my mum made him a steak dinner with all the trimmings, which he wolfed down. His family arrived and I left them to catch up as I heard the years of tears finally able to be released. I wondered when we would also have an opportunity to cry like this, and the words of Bright's intent to cause us personal upset had soaked into my skin. I know that professionals take their work seriously, but why would a retired Essex police commander, who retired a year after my brother's trial, with hundreds of cases under his belt, 33 years, 33 days, perhaps 33 degrees, why would he take such a personal vendetta against my brothers? Or was it that he took a personal vendetta against everyone in the cases he'd overseen? Cullen's family left and Cullen signed in at the local police station, as I had the contacts in Shoreditch to bring the party to Cullen. 2 female family members of Cullen remained for the party, believed to own a sex shop in Essex, and how appropriate I thought as I invited a dozen women of black and mixed race ethnicity, as this was Cullen's personal preference, to entertain him as I welcomed them into my home. I'd ordered numerous deliveries of booze, left some cash with him in case he needed anything else, and then I left for the K-bar. Cullen was also a single white heterosexual male with a preference to black and mixed race women, as was the mother of his daughter, also a prosecution witness. I opened the double French doors overlooking Putney Bridge Road as I waited for my lift to the K-bar. The party began, and as I looked across, I could see a white middle-aged man sitting in a driving seat with a brand new silver Mercedes, writing on a clipboard resting on his steering wheel. He looked up directly at me and then back down to continue with his notes. My car had arrived. I left for the K-bar and a friend named Mark, who was South African, and the boyfriend of my bookkeeper named Shay, who was also of South African nationality and whose family owned a safari resort back in South Africa. I had a great night and left Mark to it as I returned home about 3 o'clock in the morning and was making a final drink for myself as Cullen was in his room, asleep, alone. He'd had his fun. Within about 20 minutes of arriving home, I then received a call. As I looked at the screen of my mobile phone, I could see that the call was from my client, Tara. Must be a pocket or purse call, I thought. I'll answer it.
Hi Darren, it's Tara. What are you up to?
Well, whilst it was late, I had a great night out and was ready for bed. But there was something about Tara. She was very attractive. Nothing really, I replied.
Oh, shall I pop over then? That is, if you're not too tired.
It was of course a yes, and I don't know where she was or as I hadn't given her my address, but after doing so, she was with me within about 30 minutes. I opened some champagne, we drank, we laughed, we watched something about Mary on DVD and woke up the following morning to a speciality poached eggs on toast, which she enjoyed. During breakfast, we were joined by Cullen and she left to change for work. I wanted to see her again, but knew that any privacy would be at her address more often than at mine. Tara was the local darling, adored by the middle-aged property developers around town and, no doubt, refused as many dates as possible to spend time with me. She would be found at Brinkley's, Annabelle's or another haunt of significance. She was my age, and whilst my usual types were much younger, she was the sort, and I needed to find out more. I met her family, Aunt Diana, whose plummy tones were replicated at Coke Brasserie on Putney Bridge Road during lunch. Tara's mother, Heather, a newly found partner-to-be, Nick, appeared amenable, and accepting of the Cockney dating their daughter, although it later transpired through a helpful genealogist, my mum, that they also originated from Essex before settling in Hampshire, where Tara grew up. Tara's father was as down-to-earth and as Cockney as I was, albeit the smudge of green fields of Hampshire had changed it slightly, in the same way that the southwest London had started to change me slightly. He was a good man, as was his new wife, and if there was to be any advancement towards engagement, I'd put the horse before the cart this time and thank him and ask him for his permission for his daughter's hand, before buying the ring and before asking and all the rest of it. As with all the women I dated, I told them of my family situation at the very earliest moment. And it had a bizarre and unusual icebreaker. I don't know what it was, whether it was seeing some vulnerability in me or something else, brutal honesty, or I don't know what it was. But the fact I was prepared to be so honest, brutally honest, open, immediately and unreservedly, irrespective of the potential, so strange as it sounds, often excited these women. I don't know, whatever it was, Tara was ticking all my boxes. And as she did, her admirers would be becoming aware of it and up their ante. Tara was playing the game and only succumbed to my advances and absolute exclusivity once discussing the proposition of a potential ring. This switched her right on, and it seemed to be my asset, as her other admirers were either married, some were children, or unable to commit. With a glint of hope, Tara was told about my brothers and Cullen being on bail for murder, and yet she moved into my flat within a month, didn't batter an eyelid. Her property began with development from Custer, and we made it work perfectly as there was more than enough space for all three of us at Putney Bridge Road. Unfortunately though, and as expected with a live-in agreement of a woman, my numerous speakers were the first to go in storage. As Tara's refurbishment, which is a standard girlfriend move, I appreciate, did reassess and reassemble the bachelor pad. Now, I've got to be fair and agree that Tara's lamps from here and there and this and that, complemented what was left of my home, which was 2 sofas and a fire, and she made the place properly stunning. I liked the mood of the place. We dined out with her friends, she invited others to her new home, and life went on as if something I hadn't quite experienced before. Even though the posh tones, her guilty pleasures would be early evening TV of binge-watching Emmerdale, Coronation Street, and EastEnders back-to-back every night, without fail. She was an amazing cook and made sure that I was well-fed, healthy, delicious, home-cooked food, and included Cullen, other than obviously our romantic evenings alone. Cullen had naturally missed his little daughter and was finding it difficult to have contact with her, as her mother was a prosecution witness and intent to see him serve his life in jail. Now look, selfish doesn't even come close to describe women for that, or for that matter, anyone else who gives motivated statements. Cullen continued regardless and was in a communication with his ex to arrange contact, even though it was both unbeknown to me and to the police that it was a condition of his bail not to fraternise with a prosecution witness leading up to his retrial. Cullen had finally arranged a home visit with his daughter, and with nowhere else available to entertain her, I allowed him to stay and have father-daughter time together alone at my place. I rolled out the red carpet for him and his daughter, which she loved. She felt special. I left them alone and took Tara for a romantic weekend in Venice. We arrived in Venice, and I perhaps hadn't quite understood the brief on arrival when asking for the usual taxi cab, as everything is, of course, accessible by water. We took the water taxi arriving at the dock and walked into the stunning Bal Palazzo Hotel, San Marco, in Venice. As we were at the reception checking in, I upgraded us to a luxury suite with a terrace on the top floor overlooking the Venice skyline. I wanted it to be special for Tara. I had no plans other than to have an amazing weekend. It was my birthday, weekend in May, end of May, and I wanted us to both have a lovely time away. We dropped our suitcases and sat at the round table on the jetty with almost gleaming white cotton tablecloth overlooking Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute. And along with the boats and gondolas going by, we had a lunch with a cold bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, and the romance began to fill the summer air. This was a better birthday than I usually had. It was often in a club, playing art, in a club, doing something, or after a few hours with the family. We extended the afternoon onto the terrace as Tara took out a large soft brim hat, living her European dream as we sipped champagne as the sunset over the clay-tiled rooftops set and a passionate end to the day. The following day, we took coffee outside a nearby cafe and then onto the shops where I brought her a designer leather handbag, which she absolutely loved, And then we got on and continued to get lost in the moment in the winding Venetian streets. I would tease her and ask her to model for me as I took photos of her, which she was embarrassed to do. We had lunch overlooking the Grand Canal before taking a gondola ride. The gondolier sang. Amazing. As we carried on through under the bridges and being notified by him of the points of interest. Home of Marco Polo, the gondolier said, "Hey, this one is for Casanova." And the mere mention of the great romancer, the moment, Venice, everything, Tara, just made me full of the future and stopped my womanizing ways for good. It was when I saw a local couple on the quayside, sitting cuddling, reading a book, whilst their young daughter skilled an imaginary hopscotch, and I was undone. I moved my arm from around Tara and got down on my knee. Tara took a deep gasp as she knew what was coming. I hadn't planned it. Looking back, I think Tara thought I'd planned it. Before she could stop me, I said, "Look, I know it might appear too soon, and we've played with the idea, although somewhere in the distance, but I've fallen madly in love with you, and I love you. I want you to be my wife and have my children. Will you marry me?" She pulled me towards her as she sighed and spoke. Yes, I will marry you. Oh. I hadn't realised that the gondola was still moving and my proposal was being watched by those standing on Ponte Puni, one of which then began to applaud as we went underneath, embarrassing Tara as we hugged and kissed all the way back to be dropped off. We sat outside a bar and she was sitting on my lap, phoning her mum and telling her of the great news. I could hear the tears and screams of elation as I was handed the phone and congratulated. My proposal was in the heat of the moment and I had no time to ask her father for a hand, as I would have done as tradition, which is of great importance. It was spontaneous. I had no time, no choice, no thought for it. She phoned him though, and I apologised to him for not asking for his permission, then delivered the news of our engagement. He approved. As we walked back to our hotel, Tara ran into a gift shop and chose a €5 pink plastic ring and asked me to buy it for her, until such time she received the real one. I agreed, and she wore it with as much pride as if it was the real thing, something that I had in mind for her. I asked the concierge at our hotel if he could arrange a table at Harry's bar for dinner, as I wanted a special memorable place to have my first dinner with my fiancée. I'd been told by a client of Custer, in Brocklebank Road, funny enough, that Venice was very expensive, smelly in the summer, and most sought-after restaurant was Harry's bar, located just off the Grand Canal. The iconic bar was frequented by the likes of Humphrey Bogart, Truman Capote, and Ernest Hemingway, to be where the first Bellini was poured in the summer of 1948 by Giuseppe Cipriani, founder and barman of the legendary Harry's Bar of Venice. The concierge looked at me and almost smirked as he slowly lifted the telephone and in Italian made his inquiries. He then held the receiver to his chest, and I thought it was a no. "What time would you like dinner, sir?" he said, and his Italian connections had serious weight. 7:30, please, I replied and handed him a 50 quid tip. Tara was wearing a silk designer shirt I'd bought for her from Walton Street fashion boutique opposite Chanel and looked amazing with her hair up. We jogged along the back streets as the rain began to fall and I handed her my jacket, which she held over her head as we entered Harry's bar. The place was packed to the rafters and buzzing with the local hit crowd. As we were guided upstairs, where the table was brought in by the waiter carrying it over his head. Another waiter placed the white tablecloth on top, a small lamp and cutlery, and we were seated in the centre of the restaurant. Tara was overwhelmed and so happy, as was I. We both felt very special indeed. We took a Bellini and then fine wine accompanied by cannelloni and veal milanese, dessert before limoncello finalised with coffee, and left for the hotel and to bed. For our final day, I'd arranged a boat to take us to the island of Murano and a private tour of the factory by its director, assisted again by the concierge. We were collected in a classic mahogany Riva limousine and taken for a trip around the island before docking and alighting the boat with the assistant of the hand of the director and a luxury glass brand. When we returned to the hotel, we planned to design something for our wedding, and after placing our cases back in the boat, we were taken to the airport and onto home. Upon our return, Tara's extension project had come to a complete halt due to a planning issue and a complaint from the tenant above, who was a council tenant. The issue was that Tara wanted to reopen the ground floor beam open plan, and put in an RSJ's rolled steel joist, and open the whole building up, and change it from a one-bedroom to a two-bedroom, garden and everything else. The above tenant was being difficult, and although the works are usual for me, I appreciated their position because you wouldn't want to live above a building site when propping the whole building up while you lived there. I get it. So what I did, I made them an offer to pay for them to go on holiday for a fortnight. I paid for the whole holiday, give them £1,000 spending money, and they refused. I just found that odd because they probably hadn't had a holiday for about 10 years. But nevertheless, I couldn't get around it. Cullen had kept on track and had been having regular contact with his daughter. unfortunately for him, he made a massive error. The police weren't happy with his bail, nor the potential retrial. They were aware of the potential for Kenny Noyer to use this case as precedent. The mistake Cullen made was to leave a voicemail on his ex-girlfriend's phone, just arranging contact with the daughter, something they was doing all the time. But what happened was the ex-girlfriend used this evidence and complained to the police that he was in contact with her, and she was a prosecution witness. One night, Tara and I were sitting in the living room watching telly. Cullen was doing his own thing in the bedroom. He's on the phone with his daughter and at the top flight of the stairs. I was sitting sideways on the sofa, taking a glance out the window across the park. As I did, I thought I saw a man with a rifle in the bushes on the other side of the road. Then I realised that there was no traffic. Nothing, no cars, nothing passing by. Nothing, which is odd. At 7, 8 o'clock at night, during the week, it's always traffic driving past. Nothing. Kept sitting there waiting, nothing. Next thing, I heard the doorbell go. Hang on, I'm coming. As Tara went to open the front door. As she went past, I glided down the stairs past Tara and could hear Tara behind me. Darren, is everything okay? I opened the door. Half a dozen old Bill. Stand back. Are you Darren? I am, I replied, and they steadied themselves, reaching for their CS gas. The armed response unit with weapons raised behind them. I was told to stand by the oars. Tara came to the top of the stairs, looking down, watching on. Darren Cullen, we are arresting you for breach of your parole conditions. That didn't need to get any further, as I said. I'm not Cullen, I'm Darren. Cullen's upstairs asleep. They hadn't envisaged that reply. I thought it was a trap, even though there was no way of having advanced knowledge of their visit. Get out of the way, one said, and tried to barge past me on the stairs. I went in front of him. This is bizarre. I went in front of him and stood outside Cullen's room. They semicircled the door and about went, hang on a minute, give him a break, you might have nothing on. Now, the old people don't normally interested in any of that shit. They just fucking say, get out of the fucking way and just run for everyone. Look, I said, I'll get him up and I'm sure he'll come out peacefully. What's this all about? I opened the door a couple of inches next to me and just fucking did exactly what I thought. Kicked past me and just fucking grabbed hold of him. Cullen was bent up and he threw his phone at me. Dal, take my phone to G, he'll sort this one out. It's on the table, look, I threw it over there, look. Fucking, what he should have done was put it under his pillow and told me later. Fucking over the phone or at a visit. The old Bill said, thank you for that, Darren. And the rest of SCO 19 squad, otherwise known as the Metropolitan Police Specialist Firearms Command, left. I spoke with G, who said, look, there's nothing you or anyone else could have done, as you've already done more than anyone else would do. He made a silly mistake, leaving a voicemail with his ex, who was a prosecution witness, and intent to see him behind bars. She has, it appears, alerted the police of his voicemail asking for contact with his daughter, and this is a breach of his bail conditions. He'll most likely serve the rest of his sentence now until such time we can prove his innocence with any of the evidence on the pathologist. I then contacted David Martin Sperry, the barrister, looking at Bert's appeal, who told me that he was actually getting somewhere with Bert's appeal and found issues with the samples. And importantly, how it couldn't be right that Bert's sample had the medication of procyclidine contained in it. We knew that, but he was in it when it was being administered to Brian. He went on to say that he was asked to stop the review on appeal some weeks ago as Giovanni had told him that Bert had been released. What nonsense, I told him. David Martin Sperry went on to say that he hadn't received any money from Giovanni and was working pro bono. This meant that G had taken the 10 grand for himself, claiming to be a solicitor, and as such instructed David Martin Sperry to do the work on appeal whilst keeping the cash for himself. Whichever way you look at it, I either worked tirelessly, unable to fund full soap, or should I try and uncover the mystery myself? Which, to say something like that, is a daunting task and something that couldn't be more understated. The mere thought, after all this nonsense, of trying to uncover a criminal appeal without any training, let alone a corrupt case with the establishment holding it back, or the police were earning from their malfeasance. There was little or no other choice, as I saw it, and it was a very small consolation to recall the feelings of going to project management, then a company director, that gave me hope in myself. I must give 100%, I thought. I must review my brother's case, even though I have no idea where to start. The upshot of my taking on an attempt to consider the evidence and try to formulate an appeal would mean that my funds would dissipate fast, as I had only enough hours in the day and would have to either put the business on hold or reduce its productivity significantly. Added to this was the financial support for my family, and I had the dilemma of trying to get them out of prison or keep them in funds whilst they remained in. Not a decision I wanted to consider, let alone the realities that would be applicable. I had given notice to Jennifer to vacate the flat in Putney Bridge Road, and she found immediate interest, as we planned to have Tara's property refurbished and completed in good time to prepare for the wedding. Ericsson Close had a rental agreement for 2 or more years, so little room for manoeuvre. We agreed for Tara to leave her job and planned to try for a child. And the fork in the road I had placed for consideration had affected everything, although the only real importance was to get my brothers out of jail. Bert told us of a statement he'd been handed, made by a witness who gave evidence at his trial. It was from a witness, Michelle, the person who alerted me to the murder. I wanted to see the statement, as I was told it contained key evidence as to how she had been pressured into lying in court at the demands and pressure of Essex police detectives. As with the Wicks letters, we couldn't talk about its contents on the phone, which was frustrating as the calls were being monitored. We had to wait a little longer. Listen in to each episode as I engage you in my personal journey of how a boy growing up on a council estate in Essex would eventually own the most exclusive online private members club in the world.